Picture a room, one room. The floor is dirt. Not boards over joists, not stone flags, just the bare earth of the field your grandfather's grandfather ploughed. Packed hard by generations of feet, yes, but still dirt. The walls are mud mixed with straw and animal dung and whatever else held together when they pressed it between the wooden frame posts. The roof is thatch, old thatch, the kind that's been there so long it's developed its own ecosystem of mice and birds and insects that you pretend not to hear at night, because hearing them means thinking about them, and thinking about them means not sleeping. Now make it January. Make it 1623 in the Midlands of England, which is one of the colder, wetter, muddier places in a country not exactly famous for tropical weather. Make it midnight, and make the temperature outside somewhere around -10 degrees, which is not a number that should be possible in England, but January occasionally ignores what's supposed to be possible. Now, your fire is going out. That's where we start. Welcome back to Henry's History for Sleep. Tonight we're not going to a city. We're not watching merchants negotiate in silk coats. We're not looking up at cathedrals or crossing famous bridges. We're going somewhere smaller, harder, more honest. We're spending a month in a mud hut in the middle of winter. One room, roughly 5 paces by 4, 2 people, 1 cow, a pig, and a fire that you will spend approximately 1/3 of your waking hours either feeding, nursing, or in silent negotiation with. I make these history stories, and honestly, I suspect at least some of you are listening, because right now you're in a warm bed with a mattress and a duvet, and the heating came on at some point this evening, and somewhere in the back of your brain you want to feel the contrast. You want to appreciate it. That's fine. That's human. Subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. Take a moment to feel that warmth. Actually feel it. We're going to need the comparison. Here we go. Your name is Thomas Hartley. You are 19 years old. You've been married for 7 months, which means you've been running your own household for 7 months, which means this is your first winter. You are learning things about winter that nobody told you. The first thing you learn, not intellectually, not from someone explaining it, but physically in your body, in a way you cannot unlearn, is that cold is not one thing. Cold is not the same at every hour. Cold at midnight is a different creature from cold at dawn. Cold at midnight is patient. It sits outside your walls and waits. Cold at dawn is active. It has been working all night, looking for gaps. You know this because you are awake at what might be midnight or might be 2 in the morning. You can't know, not in here, not with no windows that open and the fire burned low, and the cold has found the gap between the mud wall and the roof beam on the north side, which it always finds, which it has been finding every night for a week. You can feel it on the back of your neck. Your wife Marjorie is pressed against your right side, asleep. She is 17, and she sleeps deeply the way young people do when they've been working all day, and their body simply orders them into unconsciousness. Her back is warm against your arm. That warmth is the most valuable thing in this room right now. More valuable than the food. Almost more valuable than the fire. Almost the fire. You opened your eyes because something in your sleeping mind knew the fire was wrong. Not out. You'd be colder if it were out. Much colder, you'd know. But low. Very low. The hearth is in the centre of the room. Not a fireplace, not a grate. Just the earth floor, hardened and blackened over years of use, with the fire built directly on it. A circle of stones. No chimney. There is a hole in the thatch above the smoke to find its way out, and it mostly does when the wind is right, which tonight it isn't. The smoke hangs at ceiling height, thick and grey in the light of what's left of the fire. What's left is not much. 2 pieces of wood, both burned down to thick orange-red coals with a crust of grey ash forming over them. Maybe half an hour if you're lucky and the draught stays still. You need to get up. The straw mattress crackles under you as you move. It's been crackling since October. The stuffing was fresh in September, but it's compressed and dust dry now. Marjorie shifts, makes a sound, doesn't wake. Your feet hit the floor is frozen. Not frozen like a wet street in winter. Not frozen like the puddle you might step around in a yard somewhere. Frozen like stone. The dirt has been below freezing for 3 weeks now, and that cold travels up through the soles of your feet and straight into your bones, so fast it takes your breath away. Your shirt is rough linen, ending at the knee. Your breath makes a cloud in the dim orange light. The cow is 3 steps to your left, behind the low wattle partition that divides the hut from the byre. You can hear her, a slow shifting of weight, a soft huff of breath. She smells, obviously. The byre smells like warm animal and dung and the particular sour sweet smell of cow breath. In summer, this is unpleasant. In January, it is part of the reason you're still alive. Bessie the cow generates a remarkable amount of heat for something that doesn't seem to be trying. That warmth seeps through the wattle partition all night. Take Bessie away and you'd be significantly colder, which is why Bessie sleeps indoors in winter, which is why everyone's cow sleeps indoors in winter, which is why everyone's house smells the way it does, which is to say, like a barn with people in it rather than a house with animals adjacent. You reach the fire, crouch down, your knee joints creak. You're 19 and your knee joints already creak in the cold, which tells you something about what 19 years of physical work does to a body. The coals are still alive, just. A faint pulse of heat rises when you hold your hand above them. The wood pile is by the east wall. You know exactly how much is left. You counted it 2 days ago and the answer made you feel sick. 7 pieces of split oak, 2 pieces of ash, 3 thicker pieces of something that's probably elm, though you took it from a hedge and can't be sure. That's 12 pieces of wood. Maybe 3 days' worth if you're careful. Maybe 2 if the cold gets worse. The nearest wood on your land is the copse on the far side of the south field. In dry autumn, that's a 20-minute walk. Right now, with 2 feet of snow in the field and more coming, it is not a walk. It is an expedition. It is something you do in daylight, which in January means between roughly 9:30 in the morning and 3:30 in the afternoon, if the clouds aren't low. 6 hours on a good day. You lay 2 pieces of wood on the coals. The wood is oak, split last spring and stored since then, and despite the cold it catches faster than green wood would. First a curl of smoke, then a pale flame. You lean close and blow gently, not hard and fast, which scatters ash and kills the flame, but slow and steady, like you're warming the fire rather than demanding something from it. The flame grows, orange, then yellow at the tips. You stay crouched, close enough to feel the heat on your face, and for a moment you just exist in that warmth and let your hands unclench. Your hands. Your hands are the main physical fact of your life right now. You're aware of them constantly. They're cracked, not just dry, not just chapped, but actually cracked. The skin split at the knuckles and the first joints of your fingers. Some of those splits deep enough to bleed when you make a fist. The cold does that. The cold and the work and the water. You've been breaking ice out of the water barrel every morning for 3 weeks, plunging your hands in to fill the bucket, and every time you do it, the cold hits like a punishment for something you can't remember doing. Tallow helps. Marjorie renders what she can from the pig fat, and you work it into your hands at night, but it's never enough. The cold takes it back by morning. You sit back on your heels and stare at the fire. Let me tell you what the hut is. It was built, as near as anyone can tell, sometime around 1580, maybe earlier. The frame is oak posts sunk into the ground, not on stone footings, just into the earth, which means the bottoms have been rotting since the day they went in. The walls are wattle and daub, thin branches woven between the posts, then plastered over with a mixture of mud, clay, straw, horsehair and dung, sometimes sand if there was sand nearby. The recipe varies by region and by what was available on the day. This particular mixture was made in a wet summer and dried badly, which is why there are patches near the base of the north wall that have a slightly concave surface. The mud has been slowly contracting and cracking since the day it was applied. Those cracks are where the cold gets in. In summer, the hut is actually fine, cool even. The thick walls hold the temperature and the thatch keeps the worst of the heat out. In summer, you might stand in this hut and think, yes, this works. This is a house. People live here. In January, you understand that it is not a house. Not in the way that word carries meaning. It is a shelter. The difference between a shelter and a house is this. A house keeps you comfortable. A shelter keeps you alive. Just barely, sometimes, but alive. One room, roughly 5 paces by 4 paces. In that room, the fire, in the centre. Your sleeping area, a straw mattress on a raised wooden platform about 6 inches off the floor. The platform matters because cold air pools near the floor and 6 inches up is meaningfully warmer than 6 inches down. A wooden chest where you keep anything that needs to stay dry. A shelf with your tools and some rope and a knife and a horn cup and a wooden bowl and 2 wooden spoons. A bucket. 2 sacks. One with oat grain, one with dried beans. A clay pot with a cracked lip for boiling water and cooking pottage, suspended over the fire from a hook in the beam above. Some dried herbs hanging from the rafters, rosemary, thyme, something that might be chamomile that Marjorie brought from her mother's. A bundle of tallow candles you use sparingly because tallow means fat, means calories, means something you could theoretically eat instead of burn. That is everything. On the other side of the wattle partition, Bessie. Her own small floor of compacted dung, her hay, her warmth. In the corner of the hut, a wooden gate that when lifted reveals a pit about 2 feet across and 3 feet deep. The pig lives in the pit. This arrangement is, by the standards of 1623, sensible rather than odd. The pig eats scraps. The pig adds warmth. The pig is also the thing you will kill in late February when the cold breaks enough that you need the calories, which will be both a relief and a grief because the pig is 3 months old and has a personality, and Marjorie has already named him Monday, which is either funny or heartbreaking depending on how you look at it. The smell of the hut in January taken as a whole. Smoke, always. A constant wood smoke underlayer to everything that you stopped noticing in October. Animal. The warm, slightly ammoniac smell of Bessie and Monday. The hay and dung bass note that drifts through the partition. Food. The faint ghost of last night's pottage. The slightly fermented edge of the grain sacks. Tallow when the candles burn. Your own smell and Marjorie's. Unwashed wool. Unwashed skin. the slight sour sharpness of bodies that work hard and don't bathe between October and March because bathing in winter is not something you risk unless you want a fever. The damp earth smell of the walls when they breathe, the mould smell of old thatch above. It is not pleasant. You don't notice it. Your brain stopped registering it as information in October because it never changes and is never threatening, and the brain only processes what changes, which means visitors to your hut would reel, and you would look at them with genuine confusion because you'd have no idea what they were reacting to. January 4th, 1623. Although you don't know the date, you know it's January because the days have been short for a long time and the cold has been hard for about 3 weeks. You know roughly where you are in the month by counting back from Christmas, which you remember, the one day in December when you stopped working because the church said so, and you and Marjorie walked to the service and stood in the freezing nave for an hour and a half and sang, and afterwards old Will and his wife Agnes had you in for a cup of ale and something that might have been pie, and that was Christmas, and it was good enough. That was about 10 days ago, which makes this the first week of January, give or take. You know this matters because of the wood. The wood has to last until the weather breaks. The weather in England usually starts to turn somewhere in late February, early March on a bad year. That's 8 weeks, maybe 9. 9 weeks on 12 pieces of wood. You crouched in front of that fire for a long moment doing arithmetic. The arithmetic didn't go well. By the time pale grey light starts seeping through the oiled cloth stuffed in the window, whole, you're up. And you've been up for what feels like hours, feeding the fire one small piece at a time, and the hut is cold enough that you can still see your breath, but not cold enough that the water in the bucket has a skin of ice on it, which means you're winning. Marjorie stirs, sits up. Her hair, dark, rarely fully combed since summer, is tangled around her face. She looks at you, looks at the fire, looks at you again. Wood? She asks, getting low. She nods once. There's ways she nods when she's absorbing information she doesn't like. Marjorie is 17 and she grew up in a slightly larger house than this. Her father has 2 rooms, but she's not fragile. She has her mother's practical quality of treating problems the same way you treat weather. Not fighting it, not pretending it's not there, just working out how to live alongside it. South Copse today, she says, not a question. If it stays dry? She gets up, pulls her overdress on over her shift. Her feet on the floor, a hiss of indrawn breath, because everyone's feet on the floor in January makes that sound. She wraps a shawl around her shoulders, twice, tucking the ends in, and goes to check on Bessie. You hear the low sound Bessie makes when she hears Marjorie, something between a grunt and an exhale. Bessie is 5 years old and has strong preferences about people. She prefers Marjorie. This has been the case since you got her in September, and it is a fact of life you have accepted. You dress. Your overgarment is wool. A long tunic, roughly knee-length, belted tight across your body. Over that, a heavy cloak that belonged to your father and smells of him still, though the smell is fading. Leather shoes with wool rags stuffed into the toes. Not boots. Boots are expensive. The shoes are thin enough that when you walk through frozen mud, which is every morning, you feel the cold through the soles. Breakfast is pottage. It is always pottage in January because pottage is what you have. Water, boiled, with oats or barley or dried peas or beans or some combination. Maybe a little salt. sometimes a small piece of smoked bacon from last autumn's pig. Not Monday, a different pig, last year's pig, the one whose death you didn't mourn so much because you were hungrier then than you are now. The pottage takes about 30 minutes over the fire. While it heats, you go outside. Outside is a revelation every morning. The cold hits you in the chest before you've taken 3 steps from the door. It hits with physical force, like walking into water. The skin of your face tightens immediately. Your nose runs. The air coming into your lungs is so cold it aches at the back of your throat. The village is grey and white. Snow on the roofs, every roof, all 30 odd of them, all roughly the same sloping thatch. Snow in the lanes. The lane between your hut and old Will's hut 3 doors down, white, untracked, except for where Will's feet made holes going out earlier this morning, because Will always goes out earlier. Whatever time you wake up, Will has been out for an hour already, which is either impressive or a sign that Will's hut is colder than yours and he can't sleep. The sky. In January, the sky over the English Midlands is a specific colour, not white, not grey. The colour between those two, a pale, flat, exhausted non-colour that gives no information about whether it might snow today or stay dry or do something else entirely. The sky in January offers no promises. It has no obligations. The water barrel. You kept it covered with a wooden board last night, and the board has 3 inches of frost on it. Under the board, ice. Not thick ice. Maybe a 1/4 inch, a third, but solid enough that you have to break it with your fist. Your knuckles hit the ice surface, and the cold explodes up through your hand, and you hold the broken pieces aside and reach in for the bucket. The water is just above freezing, not actually frozen through, which means the insulation worked. You fill the bucket and carry it back inside, spilling some on your shoe, which is immediately a problem because wet wool insoles in January temperatures is not a situation you want to be in for the rest of the day. You take the shoe off by the fire, stuff it with dry straw from Bessie's floor, put it back on. This is your morning. Pottage, fire, water, shoe. Old Will's full name is William Goodale. He is 53 years old, which in 1623 in a village where many men don't reach 50 is genuinely old. He has survived things. 3 famines, 2 outbreaks of plague in neighbouring parishes, a winter in 1607 that he describes as the worst since records began, and a wife who died 10 years ago, and a second wife he married 4 years ago, who is currently, in this January, showing signs of a lung sickness that her cough makes obvious, but that nobody in the village says out loud, because saying it out loud is an acknowledgement they're not ready to make. Will comes over that afternoon. He comes because he and Marjorie are cousins, distantly, and because he has the habit of checking on people. He has a bucket with him. He doesn't explain the bucket, just sets it down near the door and looks around the hut, the way experienced people look around spaces. Fast, thorough, everything registered. His eyes stop on the wood pile. That's not much, he says. I know. Southcop's tomorrow, early. I was thinking today. No. He points toward the window hole. Outside the light is already beginning its 4 o'clock retreat toward darkness. Not today. Today you check your walls, the north side above the beam. Feel it with your hand. You look at Marjorie. She's watching Will with an expression that means, listen to him. You go to the north wall. Hold your palm flat against the mud surface. In summer, the wall is just cool. In January it's cold, obviously, but the cold should be even. You move your hand toward the beam where the wall meets the roof. There. A breath of outside air against your palm. Faint, but unmistakable. I can feel it. Will nods, like this is the confirmation of something he already knew. Ice got in that crack, expanded it. You need to fill it. He points at the bucket he brought. Daub mix. I made extra. Get it in before the temperature drops tonight. You look at the bucket. Mixed into a stiff paste. Clay from the stream bank where Will got it yesterday before it refroze. Mixed with straw. Mixed with something darker that you don't ask about. Because some things about daub you're happier not knowing. How do I? Use your hands. Will's tone is not unkind. It's the tone of a man who's been explaining these things to people younger than him for 30 years. Push it in. Smooth it. Let it dry by the fire overnight. In the morning, check it again. If it's cracked, pack it again. He crosses to the fire, holds his hands out to it. His hands are worse than yours, thicker, more deeply cracked, the knuckles enlarged from years of work in all weathers. His hands look like something carved from wood and left outside too long. Agnes will want to see Marjorie, he says to the fire, not to you specifically. If you can spare her tomorrow while you're at the copse, the way he says it. Casual, studying the fire, but not casual at all. You look at Marjorie. She's gone still. How is she? Marjorie asks. Sleeping more than she did. Will watches the flames. Coffin through the night. A pause. The fire cracks. I'll come, Marjorie says. Tell her I'll come in the morning. Will nods. Stands up. Rolls his shoulders. Looks at the wood pile one more time. I have some stored ash logs. Cut them last March, good and dry. I'll leave some by your door tonight. Take them. You open your mouth. Will looks at you. His look is not aggressive. It's just clear. The look that says, we are past the part of this conversation where you pretend not to need help. Thank you, you say. Will picks up the empty bucket and goes to the door. Cold's going to get worse, he says at the threshold, not turning around. Week from now, maybe sooner, wind's coming around to the northeast. When it comes from the northeast in January, it comes across the flatlands, brings real cold with it. He goes out. The door closes. The cold draft that came in with him is already being pushed back by the fire. Marjorie stands in the middle of the room, not moving. Agnes, you say. She had a fever in November. Marjorie turns to the fire. She didn't tell anyone about it. Said it was nothing. A pause. She told me. You go to the north wall with your hands and start packing the daub into the crack, pushing it in with your fingers, cold clay under your nails, the paste smelling of earth and something older than you. Working daub into a wall crack with bare hands in January is an experience that rewards attention. The paste is cold, not just cool, cold in the way that wet clay is cold, which is different from dry cold. It has thermal mass. It holds the cold and transfers it actively into your skin. Within 30 seconds of working, your fingers are aching. By 2 minutes, the joints have a deep cold ache that's worse than the surface chill. But you keep going. You push the paste in with your index finger, following the crack upward toward the beam. The crack is wider than it looked from the fire, maybe a 1/4 inch at its widest, tapering off, and you can feel it turn slightly before the beam. You follow it with your finger, packing, smoothing, trying to fill it completely. From outside, through the newly plugged crack and then through the entire width of the wall, maybe 6 inches of mud and straw, you can hear the wind. Not loudly, barely, but you can hear it. A faint sustained note like someone blowing across the mouth of a bottle, rising occasionally when a gust comes through. The cold from that crack is focused, directional. A cold that has a source. A cold that has gotten in. You pack until you can't feel the draft. Then you move back to the fire. Hold your hands over it until the clay paste dries and starts to crack, then peel it off, and under it your skin is red and slightly raw. Marjorie brings you the wooden cup, water, warmed by the fire. You drink. The warmth going down your throat feels extraordinary, not just pleasant, actively good in a way that's hard to describe unless you've been cold enough for long enough that warmth stops being neutral and becomes something you feel gratitude toward. Do you think Will's right, you ask, about the cold getting worse? Marjorie is quiet for a moment. Will is always right about weather, she says. The next morning you go to the South Copse. You leave at first light, which in January means you leave in a grey half-darkness that is not quite dawn. You carry a pitch torch for the first part of the journey. The torch smells of burning fat and something sharper. Pine resin, you think, though you're not sure where Will gets his pitch. The south field between the village and the copse is about a quarter mile. In summer, a quarter mile is nothing, a 3-minute walk. Time to look around, check the sky, think about the day. In 2 feet of snow, it's a different calculation entirely. The snow in the south field has drifted. The first 50 feet from the village are manageable. Other feet have been here. The snow is broken and compacted. But beyond the beaten path it goes from compacted to loose, to knee-deep in the hollows, and you're making progress by lifting each foot entirely clear of the snow, stepping forward, sinking again. By the time you reach the copse, your breeches are wet from the thighs down. The linen of your shirt where it meets your waistband is damp with sweat, and you're breathing hard enough that the vapour clouds come fast and thick. The copse is there, 8 or 10 ancient coppiced hazels and a few young ash trees, dormant and bare, black against the white field. The floor of the copse is slightly sheltered from the worst drifts. The trees break the snow, and there's a layer of dead wood underneath, branches that came down in the autumn storms, buried under 2 or 3 inches of snow. You start digging. Your hands, through the wool mittens Marjorie made last summer, find the branches one by one. Most of them are thin, finger thick, the kind that burn fast and hot. These are not what you need. You need pieces thick enough to last, forearm thick, ideally something you can get 2 hours out of. There's a good piece against the base of the biggest hazel, maybe 3 feet long, a wrist thick. Ash, you think, from the smooth grey bark. You grab it with both hands and pull, and there's resistance. Ice has glued it to the ground. Then it comes free with a sound like something tearing. You stack it. 2 hours in the copse, working. Your hands stop hurting after the first 20 minutes, which is not a good sign. That means they've gone numb enough that the pain has smoothed over, and numb hands make mistakes. You check them regularly. Bend all the fingers. Hard. Feel the ache of it. As long as there's ache, there's circulation. As long as there's circulation, you're fine. Well, you're not fine, but you're not frostbitten, which in this context is what fine means. By the time you have enough, a bundle you can just barely drag rather than carry, maybe 15 pieces of decent-sized wood, the light is already beginning its afternoon collapse. The sky has stayed pale and flat all day. The cold has deepened slightly as the hours passed. You could feel it coming, a tightening in the air, a slight glaze on the fresh snow surface that wasn't there this morning. Will's northeast wind, you drag the wood home. Marjorie comes back from Agnes in the early afternoon. You hear her before you see her, the crunch of feet in the snow outside, the particular sound her steps make versus other feet. which you can distinguish now the way you could never have in summer when you are surrounded by noise. She comes in, closes the door behind her, stands for a moment with her back to you facing the door. Marjorie. She turns. Her face has a stillness to it that means she's managing something. I don't think she'll see spring, Marjorie says. The fire, the sound of Monday shifting in his pit. Bessie's slow breathing through the partition. How bad? She's hot, she can barely sit up. Marjorie moves to the fire, not because she's cold, but because fire gives you somewhere to look. She's breathing wrong. You can hear it. A pause. Will knows. You want to say something useful. The feeling of having nothing useful to say is a particular kind of helplessness. Not the helplessness of a situation you could improve with action, but the helplessness of a situation that has its own momentum and nothing you say will alter it. Did she eat? You ask, because it's specific. A little. I made her pottage. Marjorie's voice is steady. She's practicing steadiness the way you practice keeping a fire going, with attention and effort and a willingness to do it again when it fails. She thanked me. She was still herself. She knew me. We talked. About what? Marjorie smiles, a small, real smile. About summer. About when she and Will were married. She told me their house leaked for a whole year, and every time it rained everything got wet, and she said it was the happiest time she could remember. The fire. The smoke thickening slightly at the ceiling because the thatch hole is angled wrong for the direction of tonight's wind. I'm all right, Marjorie says before you ask it. She says it the way she says things she means, quiet and certain. I'm all right. I have work. She goes to the grain sack, starts measuring out tonight's pottage. Her hands are steady. Her face is forward. You go back to stacking wood by the east wall. Will was right. 4 days later, the northeast wind arrives. You know it before you hear it because you feel it. A change in the cold through the north wall, through the plugged crack you've repacked twice now. The cold shifts from general to focused again. The fire dips. The smoke that hangs at ceiling height shifts direction. The oiled cloth in the window rattles. And then the sound of it. First distant. A low tone, like something very large clearing its throat somewhere over the horizon. Then closer. Then present. The wind hitting the north wall of your hut with a sound that is halfway between a punch and a push. The thatch above you rustles. A fine dust of old straw sifts down through the smoke, glittering in the firelight as it falls. Bessie makes a sound you haven't heard before, lower than her usual register, a complaint or possibly fear. The temperature in the room drops 6 degrees in an hour. You feel it happening. There's a point where the fire, which was winning the argument with the cold, is suddenly only tying. And then there's a point, around dusk, when the outdoor temperature plummets to something below what any thermometer in this village could measure, because thermometers don't exist yet in English villages in 1623, where the fire is losing. You feed it more wood, you're burning faster than you can replenish, which is math that only goes one direction. Marjorie is close to the fire, working by firelight, mending your other shirt, the one with the tear in the shoulder from a copse branch. Her needle moves in and out of the cloth with a small regular sound. She hasn't looked up in an hour. Mundy is quiet in his pit. Bessie is breathing slowly on the other side of the partition. You've gone in to check on her twice tonight. She seems all right. Possibly slightly warmer than usual, which at first doesn't make sense. Until you think about it. In extreme cold, A warm-blooded animal burns more energy staying warm. She'll need more hay. She'll need more water that you'll have to break the ice to get. You've been awake for a long time when you notice the sound. It's coming from the roof, not the wind. You know the wind now, know its tones and rhythms. This is different. A lower, intermittent sound. A creak followed by a longer, deeper groan. The sound of something under weight. The thatch is shifting. The snow has been building for 3 weeks. The cold has made the thatch brittle. The wind is pushing. You stand up, look at the ceiling. The smoke obscures most of it. Thomas. Marjorie has stopped sewing. I hear it. What is it? Snow weight, I think. Or the pole. The ridge pole. The long horizontal beam that runs the length of the roof, on which the thatch is hung. If the ridge pole fails, the roof fails. If the roof fails in this temperature, you have a problem of a different order than wood supply. The sound stops, starts again, then stops. The fire pops, a log settles. The wind outside howls its flat Midlands howl. I'll go up, you say. It's dark. I'll take a torch. She looks at you with an expression that contains several things at once. Fear for the roof, fear for you on a roof in the dark and the wind, and the pragmatic recognition that someone has to go. She nods. You take the pitch torch, open the door. The wind hits you like a slap. You gasp and bend forward automatically, the cold so sharp it's almost burning. The torch gutters wildly. You angle your body to shield it. The exterior wall. You move to the north side and look up. In the torchlight, the snow load on the north-facing pitch of the roof. A thick compressed layer, grey-white in the torch's orange glow, and there is a visible bow in the thatch near the ridge. A slight concavity that wasn't there last week, you think, though memory in emergencies is unreliable. The wind gusts, the torch gutters. You grab the edge of the wall for balance. The concavity is not catastrophic, not yet, but the weight is there, and the pole under it is old. You go back inside. Not tonight, you tell Marjorie. It's not failing tonight, but tomorrow I need to get up there and shift some of the snow. She picks up her sewing. Her hands are steady. You should sleep, she says. So should you. I'll sleep when you do. You look at her in the firelight. 17 years old, needle in her hand. The fire-making shadows move across her face, the cold outside trying every gap it can find. Thank you, you say. She looks up. The look she gives you is one of the most useful looks a person can give you. A look that says, I see you, and I know what you mean, and you don't have to say it out loud. Go to sleep, she says. 6 days into the northeast wind, the village has what the old people later call the death night. They don't call it that until a month afterward, when they can look back on it. In the moment it has no name. It's just the night the cold decides to make its full argument. You know it's going to be bad from mid-afternoon. The light changes, not just the usual collapse into early darkness, but a thickening in the air itself, a pressure. The sky dropping lower and the clouds changing from pale, flat nothing to something heavier with real intention. By 4 o'clock the snow begins again. By 6 you can barely see the house 3 doors down through the window hole. You plug the window hole with an extra rag. Check the door latch. Check the north wall with your palm. The crack is holding. Throw 3 pieces of wood on the fire. By what feels like 8, the temperature inside the hut is the coldest it has been since you moved here. You can see your breath at the fire, not at the far end of the room. That's been true for weeks. At the fire itself, This is new. The fire is putting out the same heat it always puts out. The cold is just winning harder. Bessie makes sounds all evening. Not alarmed, or not sounds you recognise as alarm. Just more frequent. More shifts of weight. She knows something. Animals always know something. Monday is silent. He went silent before the snow started, which you thought nothing of. But now his silence has the quality of something hunkered down, with its full attention on waiting. You and Marjorie lie close together on the mattress. The blanket is doubled. You folded it over, and you're both still wearing your clothes because undressing in this temperature is a violence against yourself you're not willing to commit. She's against your chest, facing the fire, and you're around her back, and the warmth you generate together is a small, specific warmth. Warm where you touch, cold everywhere you don't. You don't sleep, or you sleep in pieces. Small disconnected fragments, 15 minutes here, half an hour there, each one broken by the sound of the wind going up or the fire going down. The fire going down is the one that wakes you with immediate complete consciousness. Some part of your brain has assigned it the same emergency status that a crying child has for a parent, a sound that breaks through sleep and does not allow negotiations. 3 in the morning, or what your body, which has been doing this arithmetic for weeks, estimates as 3 in the morning. The fire goes critically low, not out, but close. You get up. The cold is different at 3 in the morning after a day of sustained minus temperatures. It's not the cold you feel on your face when you step outside in the morning. That cold is sharp and immediate. This cold is heavy. It has settled into the room the way water settles. It's at floor level. It rises around your legs as you stand up, and the warmth you had under the blanket rushes out from every gap in your clothing like something escaping. The wood pile. You count what's left by feel. 4 pieces. 4 pieces of decent wood, 2 pieces of thin branch stuff that burns in 20 minutes. You have maybe 4 hours until dawn. Do the math. You lay the 2 thin branch pieces on first. They catch fast, flare, give you immediate heat and almost immediate anxiety because fast burning means fast gone. Then 1 thick piece on top. The fire responds. It climbs back from near nothing to something real, and the wave of heat that comes from it is so immediate and so physical that your eyes water. Not from the smoke, from the heat after the cold. Your skin registers heat and cold differently, and the transition, when it's fast enough, reads as pain before it reads as warmth. You crouch there, 3 pieces of wood between you and 4 a.m., outside the wind, the snow against the thatch, the periodic groaning of the roof, and in the silence under all of that, the sound of Agnes's cough from 3 doors away, carrying through the frozen village night with absolute clarity, the way cold carries sound, cleanly, without distortion. You can hear her from here. Agnes's cough has changed in the past week. It has a depth to it now, a quality that is different from the cough of a person who is ill and recovering. Different in the way you can't define until you've heard it, and once you've heard it, you can't unhear it. Marjorie is awake. You can tell by her breathing. Neither of you says anything. The fire, the cough, the wind. You sit there by the fire until the 4 hours are done and the grey light comes, and you're still alive, and your home is still standing, and the wood is gone, and you need more. Dawn is not dramatic. It never is in January. The darkness doesn't break. It just fades, slowly, from black to charcoal to a grey that eventually becomes distinguishable from the inside of your eyelids. You're still at the fire. Your legs are numb from crouching. At some point in the early hours you sat fully on the floor, your back against the hearthstones, feet extended, and somewhere in there you found 40 minutes of genuine sleep because when the light comes you wake from it, which means you are actually under. The fire is ash. Not fully. There's a deep buried pulse of heat under the grey, enough to catch from. But for the first time since October it has nearly gone out. The room is the coldest it has ever been with you in it. Your breath makes a dense cloud. You rebuild the fire from near nothing, the way you've learned to do it. Restraint first, air before fuel. You blow, slow and long, on the deepest part of the ash pile, in the spot where the heat is. You can feel it on your lips when you're close enough. Slow breath, long. The ash glows, dims, glows again. A thin thread of smoke rises, then tinder. Dried fungus, dried grass, shreds of moss. The fungus first, laid directly on the ash where it's hottest. More slow breath. A flame, small, uncertain, barely there, but there. You build on it, piece by piece, and by the time there's enough light to navigate the room without the fire's help, you have a flame that is beyond doubt, beyond uncertainty, a fire that will stay now unless you leave it. You've never in your life felt such specific relief about a piece of burning wood. Then you go outside to get more. The village after the death night looks like a place that has been through something, which it has. Several roofs have new deformations, not collapsed. Nothing collapsed. But you can see where the snow weight has pressed down the thatch on the flatter pitches. Old Thomas the shepherd's house has a roof that looks like a frown, pressed down in the middle, slightly lifted at the eaves. You make a note to tell someone. The lane is a different world than yesterday. Yesterday it was managed snow, tracked and broken by feet. Today it's been drifted by last night's wind, and the drifts are chest high at the worst points. You wade through them, and wading through chest-high snow is not a movement that has dignity. It's a plunging, a controlled fall forward repeated until you're through. Old Will is outside before you are, which is tradition. He's clearing snow from in front of his door with a wooden board. He looks up when you come round the corner. He looks terrible, a man who didn't sleep. "Agnes?" you ask. A silence that is an answer. "She made it through," he says eventually, "but she's worse." He goes back to clearing snow. The scrape of the board on frozen mud. The snow hitting the side of the lane. "I need wood," you say. "I'm out." He stops. "The ash logs I put by your door. I used them. In the night. I'm sorry." Will sets down the board. Looks at you. His face does the calculation. How much wood does he have? How much does he need? What is Agnes's cough worth against your need? And the calculation takes maybe 2 seconds. "I have a store under the floor in the byre. Lift the board in the far corner. Take what you need. I'll replace it. Yes, you will. Take what you need." He picks up the board, goes back to clearing snow. You go into Will's byre. His cow, a red-brown animal with a broken horn, looks at you sideways. You go to the far corner, lift the board. Under it, a shallow pit lined with straw, and in the pit, 8 pieces of good dry oak, split last spring. You want to take all of it. You know you shouldn't take all of it. You take 4 pieces and replace the board. Will doesn't look up. You don't say anything. You carry the wood home. Monday, the pig, becomes Monday in a different sense on the 14th of January. You don't plan it for the 14th. You plan it for late February, for when the cold breaks, for when you'll need the calories most. That's the sensible calculation. That's the thing you decided. But on the 13th, in the afternoon, You go into the pit to check on him. Give him scraps. Feel his ribs the way Will taught you, to assess the meat on them. He's thin. You knew he'd gotten thinner. They all thin in winter, even kept warm because the body burns the fat. But the difference between knowing something and running your hands over bone ridges is the difference between a number and a fact. He's thinner than he should be. He's burning more calories staying warm than you can feed him on the scraps you have. He's going to get thinner every week until the cold breaks. If the cold breaks in late February, he'll have less meat on him than he does today. And you have less food than you had last week. You sit on the edge of the pit for a while. Monday regards you with his small bright eyes. He has a dark patch over his left eye that Marjorie pointed out in October, laughing, saying it made him look like a scholar. You sit there for 10 minutes. Then you go back inside and tell Marjorie. She goes still in the way she goes still when she's absorbing bad news. Now, she asks. Tomorrow, first light. She looks at the pit, at Monday, then back at you. All right, she says. She goes back to the thing she was doing. You go back to the thing you were doing. In the morning you kill the pig. You do it quickly, the way you were taught. Fast, and it's over. You and Marjorie work all day on the carcass, jointing it, salting what can be salted, setting pieces to freeze in the cold, which requires no special equipment in January. The cold is everywhere. The fat you render over the fire, standing over the pot for hours as it liquefies and the cracklings rise. The cracklings you eat, the fat you store. The smell of rendering fat in a cold room is extraordinary. It is the smell of warmth and calorie and survival rendered literal. The whole hut smells of it for 3 days. Marjorie does not name the next pig. The 3rd week of January is when you begin to understand winter not as a problem to be solved, but as a condition to be survived. This distinction matters. When winter is a problem to be solved, you're always looking for the solution. For the cold breaking, for the wood to be enough, for the food to last. Every day is a calculation. How much did you spend? How much is left? Are you ahead or behind? When winter is a condition to be survived, you stop calculating. Not because you don't need to, you still need to, but because the calculation has been done and the answer is already determined and all that's left is the execution. You have enough food to get to late February if you're careful. You have enough wood if you get to the copse twice more. You have Bessie, whose warmth through the partition is non-negotiable. You have Marjorie. You have the fire. These are your resources. They are finite. They are not improvable at this point, so you stop trying to improve them and start trying to use them well. The days settle into rhythm, up before light, not just before dawn, but in the dark before dawn, because the fire needs tending and Bessie needs water and the day needs to be started. Then the morning tending, fire, water, Bessie, food. Then work, whatever the work is, maintenance on the hut, collection trips when the weather allows, the endless small tasks of keeping a dwelling standing against a winter that wants to take it apart piece by piece. Midday is the warmest part of the day. Some days when the sun appears, rarely but sometimes, you feel the temperature outside climb to something almost manageable, something around freezing, and you use those hours hard. Go to the copse, check the walls, do anything that requires the outside. Then the afternoon retreat into darkness and cold and firelight. Then evening, the pottage, the sitting close to the fire, Marjorie's needlework or spinning when there's wool, your mending or the repair of small tools, or occasionally you have a tallow candle lit and you read, slowly moving your lips, working through the Bible your mother gave you at your wedding. Marjorie reads better than you. She reads over your shoulder sometimes, faster, but she doesn't take the book away from you. She just reads ahead silently and waits for you to catch up where she already is. Nights are long, very long. The darkness in mid-January lasts 15, 16 hours. You sleep more than you've ever slept in your life. Not all at once, but in pieces, filling the dark hours because sleep is warm and sleep uses less food than waking, which is not something you think in those terms but which your body has calculated independently. You dream more than usual. Vivid, strange dreams. Summer fields, the smell of warm earth after rain, the sound of bees in warm air. Dreams with such specific sensory truth that you wake from them disoriented, reaching for warmth that should be there, and the cold and the dark reassemble around you like a truth you briefly escaped. Agnes Goodale dies on the 20th of January, not in the night, in the morning, which Will later says is a mercy. She was awake and clear-headed when she went, which he says is better than the alternative. He says it once and doesn't say it again. You and Marjorie are at Will's hut within an hour. The hut is cold in a different way than yours. Not colder, Will has kept his fire well, but there is a quality to the air that is specific to the recently dead. You've experienced it before, but not in this context. Not in a neighbour's house, not with someone you knew. Agnes is on their bed. Will has folded her hands. Her face is relaxed in a way it wasn't in the last days. Marjorie goes to sit beside her. Will stands with you by the fire. He has a cup of something dark, ale or something stronger that he's been keeping in the corner. He doesn't offer you any. You don't ask for any. This is not a social moment. It's a standing beside someone moment. She wasn't frightened, Will says. To the fire. That's good. No, it is. He drinks, sets down the cup. She was never frightened of the right things, always frightened of thunderstorms. A sound that might be a laugh if the circumstances were different. Terrified of thunderstorms, but not this. She wasn't frightened of this. A pause. I need to tell the parson. The ground's frozen. Burial will have to wait. You nod. This is practical. In frozen ground, you can't dig a grave. You can't bury someone in January in a village in England in 1623. You have to wait for a thaw. This is not unusual. This is simply what winter means. She can stay here with me, Will says, till the ground softens. You go to get the parson. You wade through the snow to the church end of the village, knock on the door of the parsonage, and the parson, young, barely 30, cold reddened cheeks and an ink-stained finger, comes to the door. You tell him. He nods and says he'll come directly. On your way back you pass the church. The graveyard around it is white, unmarked by recent disturbance. Everyone who died in winter lies in the ground from a milder time, or waits. The cold grey sky above it, the rooks in the bare elm trees at the churchyard wall making their cold morning sounds in the silence. You go back to Will's. On the 25th of January the temperature rises, not dramatically, not spring, but enough. The ice skin on the water barrel goes from half an inch to a quarter inch to, on the 26th, just a skim that breaks when you look at it. The mud at the edges of the lane stops being frozen mud and becomes regular mud, which is to say the worst possible thing to walk through. Mud that grabs your shoes and pulls at them and soaks up through the leather like it's trying to become part of you. But the temperature, the fire which has been fighting and losing for 3 weeks, starts winning again. You can feel it. The room stops fighting back. The wall stops being a hostile surface and starts being just a wall. You can step away from the fire and not feel the cold, advance immediately to replace the warmth. You open the window hole for an hour. The air that comes in is cold but different. A wet cold, a thawing cold, not the dry killing cold of the northeastern wind. It smells of mud and bare branches, and something that is not yet spring, but contains the theoretical possibility of spring. A question contains the possibility of an answer. Bessie notices. She shifts toward the partition and puts her nose against the wattle as if she can smell what's coming through. Animals know. But then, on the 28th, the cold comes back. Not as bad as the death night, but a return of something you thought might be over. The tightening, the clamped down grey sky, the ice reforming on the barrel. You had let yourself begin to feel something, the beginning of unclenching. And then, you sit by the fire that evening and you don't say anything for a long time. Marjorie across the fire looks up once and reads your face and looks back down. February is still a month away, she says. I know. But it does come. I know it does. And March. She says it like a fact, not comfort. Comfort is something else, something softer. She says it like a report of reality. These months exist. They are coming. They will arrive. The cold is not permanent. It has never been permanent. You have survived weeks already. March, you say. March, she confirms. The fire. On the 30th of January, on a day when the sky breaks open for the first time in weeks. Real sun, pale but actual, the kind of sun that throws shadows. You go up the hill. There's a hill half a mile to the east of the village. Not dramatic, not a proper hill by mountain standards, but enough. A rise that takes you above the tree line, above the village roof lines, above the plane of the valley floor. In summer, children fly kites up there. In winter, nobody goes because the wind is worse up there and there's no shelter. You go because of the wood. There are trees at the top, an old stand of beech, some dead wood at the margins, and the south-facing slope has shed most of its snow already, and the footing is better than the fields, but also because you need to see something other than the hut's interior. There are days when 4x5 paces closes in like a hand closing. You don't say this to Marjorie. She has her own version of it, and you both manage it by not talking about it, which is a form of consideration for each other that the cramped space requires. The consideration is, I know you are struggling with this, and I am not going to make you explain it. You go up the hill with your hatchet and a rope for binding wood. The climb is slower than it would be in summer. The south slope is mostly bare, but the mud is thick and treacherous, the freeze-thaw having left the soil in a state of maximum instability. Your shoes find no grip. You slip twice. Both times you catch yourself with your hands, and both times your hands come up black with cold mud. But you get up, and at the top you stop. The valley, the field system around the village, the strips, each one buried under an even snow, indistinguishable from each other except by the slight ridges where the drainage furrows rise above the field surface. The river to the south, frozen, a white ribbon between dark banks. The mill where the river bends. The church at the east end of the village, its tower the highest thing in the valley, grey stone against the pale sky. The 30-odd roofs, the smoke from them, every house with its fire going, every chimney hole offering up its pale grey thread of smoke. 30 threads of smoke rising from 30 roofs, and meeting somewhere above the village in a general haze that lies over the whole valley like something breathing. The woods beyond the valley, dark, still, and over all of it, the sun, low, January low, barely clearing the horizon, but present, throwing shadows from the trees that are long and precise and blue on the snow. You stand there for a long time, not thinking anything specific, or thinking everything at once, which feels like the same thing. This valley, these 30 houses with their fires, in each of those fires a family, in each of those fires the same arithmetic, wood left, food left, cold days remaining. Some of them better placed than you, some of them worse. Old Thomas with his bowing roof, the widow Matilda at the north end who has no cow and lives alone, and whose fire you've been in the habit of checking since December, all of them in the same winter, all of them pressing toward the same February, the same March. There's something about seeing it from above. The village stops being a place you're in and becomes a place you can see. And you can see that it's small. You can see that the fields around it are enormous. They go to the horizon in every direction, the empty white fields, and in each of them the same emptiness, the same dormancy, the same held breath. But you can also see that the smoke is still rising. Every one of those 30 fires is still burning. You pick up your hatchet and start on the dead wood at the beech tree margin. The wood you bring down from the hill is not the best. Some beech, which burns hot and fast. Some more substantial, a fallen branch from one of the old trees, still with bark on but dry enough. You're glad for it. The view stays with you on the way down, sticks in your memory with a clarity that the days inside the hut don't have. Inside there are textures and smells and immediate sensations, but no scale, no perspective. The hill gave you perspective, and perspective is a kind of food, not metaphorically. It does something to the mind that the mind needs when it's been contracted for weeks inside 4 mud walls with the cold pressing in. It reminds the mind of its own size, of the fact that the world is larger than the room. You get home before the light fails. Marjorie sees the wood, sees your face, asks nothing, but she makes the pottage slightly richer that night, more oats than she might have, more of the precious fat, and you eat it in the firelight with the sense of a small victory. Not the war goes on, but a day, one, the last week of January. You've been keeping a rough count of days since Christmas. You've lost a few, probably. Days in the worst of it, where consciousness was so focused on immediate survival that the abstract concept of day number fell away. But by your count it should be the last week, and January does something in its last week that winter does generally. It consolidates itself, tightens, as if it knows February is coming and wants to make its final argument before the changeover. Not warmer, but different. The cold loses its edge of surprise. You know it now, know its range, know what it will and won't do. You've been through its worst and you're still here. Your body knows things it didn't know in October. Your hands know how to break ice at specific thicknesses with specific force to maximize the opening and minimize the splash. They know how to split a particular type of log with a hatchet in cold, not the same as splitting it in summer, requires a different angle of attack because the wood is denser. They know, in the dark, how to feed a fire the exact piece it needs without looking. Your skin has adapted. The cracks in your knuckles are still there. They'll be there until spring, but the rest of the skin has thickened in the way that repeated exposure to cold and work and weather produces, hardened. What your skin will look like at 50, if you get to 50, has become clearer. Your sense of temperature has recalibrated. What felt cold in October feels unremarkable in January. The fire that now feels comfortable would have felt barely sufficient 3 months ago. And you've also learned, this one took the longest to accept, that you are never, in January, fully warm. Not in the way that a comfortable person means warm. You're warm enough to function, warm enough to sleep, warm enough to keep the cold from becoming damage. That's the January standard. Fully warm is a summer concept. In January you manage warmth the way you manage everything else. Enough. Marjorie notices the same things in herself. She doesn't list them, but occasionally she'll do something. Adjust the fire, feel the wall, break ice in the barrel, with a competence that wasn't there in the autumn. You'll see it, and she'll catch you seeing it, and there's a shared recognition in that. Not pride, exactly. Something more basic than pride. Something like, we are learning how to live here. 2 days before what you estimate is the end of January, Will comes over again. He's thinner than he was a month ago. Not alarming, everyone is thinner in January, but you notice it. He brings a small cloth bundle, unwraps it on your shelf. Inside, a piece of hard cheese, slightly yellowed, and a handful of dried apple rings that his wife had put up in the autumn. Agnes had put them up in the autumn. He doesn't say this. He doesn't say anything about where they came from, just sets them down. For the two of you, he says, you don't argue. You've learned not to argue. He sits by the fire for a while, long enough to warm his hands, long enough to eat a bowl of your pottage which Marjorie puts in front of him without asking, and which he eats slowly, looking at the fire. Spring, he says eventually. Getting closer, you say. He nods, says nothing, finishes the pottage, hands the bowl back. The parson says we can try the burial after a thaw, he says, whenever the ground lets us. We'll be there, Marjorie says, from across the room, not turning around. Will nods, gets up, puts his hand briefly on your shoulder. Not a gesture he's made before, not something comfortable men of his generation do easily. And then he goes. The door closes. You sit with the cheese and the apple rings on the shelf and the sound of his footsteps fading in the snow outside. He'll be all right, Marjorie says. You look at her. He survived harder than this, she says. He told me once. 3rd winter after his first wife died. He almost didn't make it. Too cold, not enough food, too much grief. She turns to look at you. He made it. The fire. He made it, you say. The 31st of January. Not that you know the exact date, but by your count it should be the last day, or close to it. The evening's quiet. Quieter than usual, which is saying something because January evenings have a quality of silence that the other months don't have. The snow absorbs sound, the cold keeps people inside, the darkness keeps the village still. But this evening is especially quiet. The wind has dropped. For the first time in weeks there's no wind. The air outside is cold, still very cold, below freezing. The kind of cold that turns your breath to vapour immediately, but still. Without the wind, the cold doesn't push through the gaps. Without the wind, the fire burns cleanly, its smoke going straight up through the hole in the thatch. You can hear things you couldn't hear in the wind. The creak of the wooden chest as the wood expands and contracts with temperature. Bessie's steady breathing through the partition. The faint sound of something, a tree, maybe, in the copse, settling in the cold. From Will's direction, nothing. Will's hut is quiet. He came over this morning briefly. He's all right. He has enough wood and enough food and his own knowledge and his own resources. He is not all right, but he is managing. You made him take a piece of the salted meat from Monday. He objected. You didn't listen to the objection. He took it. Tonight the fire burns well. Not with the frantic, desperate quality of the worst nights, when you were throwing wood at it just to keep it from dying. Tonight it burns the way a fire is supposed to burn, steadily, without drama, throwing good heat into a room that is warmer than it's been in weeks. The still air has something to do with it. So does the fact that you've been to the copse twice this week, and the woodpile is fuller than it's been since before the death night. You've spent so much of this month in relationship with fire, not just feeding it, actually in relationship with it, the way you're in relationship with anything that your life depends on. The fire has moods in January. It has good hours and bad hours. It burns better on still nights. It struggles in wind. It reacts differently to different wood. You've become fluent in it. Marjorie is reading the Bible by firelight, working through a passage with the careful deliberateness of someone who's moving her lips slightly. The light moves, and the text swims, and she loses her place and finds it again. She does this every night. You've stopped noticing it. You're doing nothing. Just sitting. Hands around the wooden cup which has water in it, warm from sitting near the fire. This, you think, is what January is. Not just the crisis nights, not just the wood expeditions and the freezing hands and the counting of resources. Also this, sitting by a fire at the end of a day with someone you chose in a small warm room while the cold is outside and not in. The fire's been burning in this space, in this hearth circle, for as long as this hut has existed. Before you, before your parents were born. Other people sat in this spot. Other hands tended this same earth hearth. Other eyes watched this same smoke rise, and these same flames shift. And they will after you. Long after you, the earth of this floor will remember the heat, will hold the impression of generations of fires, the long record of warmth kept alive in the cold. Some version of this, always. The candle, you've allowed yourself a candle tonight, a small one, burns down to a stub. You lean forward and pinch it out. Firelight only. Marjorie has closed the Bible. She's watching the fire with the slight slackness around her eyes that means she's on the near edge of sleep but not there yet. That state between. Still conscious enough to see the fire, not conscious enough to choose to look away. You move to the bed. The straw crackles under you, always crackles. You've stopped noticing this too. You'll notice it again in spring when you replace the straw and sleep on something fresh, and the difference is so stark it wakes you up. You pull the blanket up, doubled, as it has been since the cold came. Wool, rough, heavy. The warmth of it settling over you is immediate, your own body heat reflected back, the blanket trapping it. Marjorie comes to the bed, settles in. She's facing the fire. You're around her back. The warm place between you. That specific warmth, that is the warmth of two people who have slept this way for 7 months, and whose bodies have learned each other's warmth, the way a hand learns the shape of a cup. The fire settles into its late-night mode. Lower, longer flames, less active. It will be there in the morning. You know this now in your body the way you know your own heartbeat. The fire will be there. The sounds. Bessie. Her slow breath. Her occasional shift of weight. The creak of the hut. Not alarming now. Familiar. The hut talks to you in January. You've learned its language. Outside, nothing. No wind tonight. The cold is still and silent. doing its patient work, but you are not in it. You are in here, in the warm, in the small circle of what you have built and maintained and fought for. The second week of January, the cold is steady, and Will comes over every other day. Not to socialise, not to make conversation. He comes because he is checking on you, and because checking on people is what gets done in a village in winter, and because he has nobody at home to check on him, and coming over here gives him somewhere to point his attention that is not the shape his hut has taken since Agnes died. He comes with small things, a cup of rendered lard, a handful of dried herbs from Agnes's stock, once a small onion he'd been saving. He sets these down without ceremony, and you accept them without ceremony, and that is the transaction. But he also talks. Will has the kind of practical knowledge that accumulates over 50 years of keeping a body alive in England, and he has never thought of this knowledge as remarkable, has never thought to organise it or offer it directly, because the kind of people he knows already know it. You are the exception. You're the first person in a long time who needs to be told things that everyone around him learned at 10. "Your roof," he says one afternoon, looking up at the ceiling. "The thatch is dry." Good. The bowing you notice near the ridge has stabilised. But Will is looking at something else. There. He points to the east corner, where the rafters meet the wall plate. There's a faint dark stain. Not dramatic. Just a discoloration where the straw has absorbed something. Water, Will says. From last week's melt. It got in before the refreeze. You look at it. It's not dripping, you say. Not now. But when the thaw comes, proper thaw, March, that corner is gonna go. He says it without drama. You need to rethatch the east corner before spring rains. Otherwise it just gets worse. He shows you what to look for. The dark stain means the thatch layer above has failed. Below that layer, the support straw has been wet and refrozen and is now brittle. When the weather warms and expands the wood frame even slightly, that corner will open. How do I fix it, you ask? I'll show you in spring. He turns away from the corner. Right now you can't get up there safely, and it won't get worse before March. Just know it's there. This is the quality of Will's teaching. He tells you what exists, what it will do, and what you should do about it in the order those things should be done. No wasted words, no drama. The world, he seems to believe, is full of problems, and most of them can be managed if you know they're there and respond to them at the right time. The problems that kill you are the ones you didn't know about, or the ones you knew about and addressed at the wrong time. Agnes used to say I was the most boring man she'd ever met, he says once out of nowhere, warming his hands at your fire. You look at him. She said I had no story in me, just facts and weather and what needs doing. He looks at his hands. She wasn't wrong. A pause. But she married me anyway. Another pause. She said boring kept her alive. His voice is steady, his face is a wall. Said some of her neighbours' husbands had plenty of story and they were all dead or drunk or gone. He gets up, goes to the door. Boring, he says at the door. Keep the fire, check the walls, don't eat your seed grain. That's all there is to it. He goes out. You sit for a while with his advice and the silence he left in the room. Then you go check the walls. She lives at the north end of the village in the smallest hut, the one with the lowest ceiling and the door that hangs slightly crooked because the frame has shifted and nobody has fixed it. Her husband died 4 years ago. Her children are grown and gone. 2 to other villages. 1 to a town whose name you've heard but can't place on any map you've ever seen. She's somewhere in her 50s. She's alone. You've been stopping by every few days since November. Will suggested it once casually, in a way that wasn't a suggestion, and you started doing it. The arrangement is simple. You knock, she opens the door, you check that she's alive and the fire is burning. She gives you some piece of her considerable and unsolicited opinion about the state of the village, and you go home. She is not a soft woman. You get the sense she never was. Her voice has a quality of someone who has been dealing with things directly for decades and has stopped bothering with the diplomatic approach. She told you once in the first week of December that your thatch was going to give you trouble in winter. You said thank you and did nothing about it. She was right about the east corner. In the second week of January you stop by and she opens the door holding something, a carved wooden object, small. You look at it, a smooth round ball, worn down on one side from being held, with a design cut into the surface, interlocking lines, knotwork. My husband made this, she says without preamble. When we were first married, he said it would keep his hands busy in winter. She turns it in her fingers, holds it out to you. For your wife. Tell her it's for her hands when the needlework gets tedious. You look at the carved ball. It is clearly something she has kept for 30 years. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. She presses it into your hand. Her hand is cold, her grip is strong. I'm giving it to you. Go home. She closes the door. You stand outside in the cold for a moment, looking at the carved ball in your palm. Then you go home. Marjorie turns it over and over in her hands that evening by the firelight. She doesn't say much, but she keeps turning it, and you can see her fingers finding the worn, smooth patch where Matilda's husband's thumb went, decade after decade, winter after winter. He must have had big hands, she says. Maybe. She closes her fingers around it, looks at the fire. I want to carve something, she says. I can get you a piece of... Not now. In the spring. I want to learn to carve. She puts the ball in her pocket, goes back to her needlework. You go back to your mending. The fire. Outside, the cold and the silence. On Sundays you go to church. You walk to the church at the east end of the village. Everyone does. The law says so, and habit says so, and the parson says so. And on balance, going to church is easier than not going, so you go. In summer, the church is fine. Stone walls, a little cool even in July, but you're only there for an hour and the crowd of bodies warms it slightly. The stone holds the temperature of the previous day. In January, the stone has been holding the temperature of the previous 3 months. The church is colder inside than it is outside. This seems impossible until you're inside it, and then it seems obvious. The stone walls are thick, much thicker than your mud walls, and those walls have been absorbing cold since October. They have thermal mass. They don't warm easily, but they don't cool easily either. They have been cooling since October, and now they are a machine for maintaining a temperature of approximately the worst the winter has offered. The nave on the second Sunday of January is cold in the way that a cave is cold. Not the active moving cold of a wind, but a stored cold, still and deep. The cold of something that has been undisturbed for months. You can see your breath. Everyone can see their breath. The parson, at the front, exhales visible vapour with each phrase of the service, so that he appears to be declaiming from inside a small personal cloud. 30-odd villagers packed into the nave. Their bodies generate heat, not enough, but enough to make the second half of the service marginally less miserable than the first. You stand between Marjorie and Will. Will stands with the particular stillness of a man enduring something. He has attended every Sunday service of his adult life. He will attend every Sunday service of whatever remains of his adult life. He does not appear to derive particular comfort from this, but he does it, which is perhaps more honest than doing it because it feels good. The parson is reading. His breath cloud expands and contracts. He is a young man, you've established, with good intentions and cold feet. Literally cold feet. His shoes are thin. You can see him shifting his weight occasionally in a way that is not devotion but discomfort. The scripture is about warmth, or it is about shepherds, which is adjacent to warmth. You half listen. The other half of your attention is on the quality of the cold in the stone floor coming up through your leather soles, which is becoming urgent. You think about your fire, whether you banked it right before you left, whether it will be down when you get back or manageable. You think about this the way you think about Bessie when you're away from the hut. A low background calculation, a check-in, a confirmation that the main thing is being managed. After the service, there is a moment in the churchyard when people stand together briefly before the cold disperses them back to their fires. This is the social life of the village in January. 30 seconds in a churchyard, breathing vapour before everyone goes home. You talk to old Thomas about his roof. He says it's all right. He's watched it. It's not moving. You're not sure you believe him, but it's his roof and his call. A woman named Joan, who lives 2 doors north of Will, asks Marjorie something in a low voice. Marjorie listens, nods, says she'll come by tomorrow. You don't ask what it is. These small arrangements happen around the edges of daily life in a village. Somebody needs something. Somebody can provide it. The particulars don't need to be announced. The parson comes out of the church door and stands for a moment, looking at the graveyard. His expression is difficult to read. He catches your eye. The ground is still solid, he says, as if answering a question you haven't asked. I know, you say. I checked this morning. He means Agnes. He means he hasn't forgotten. He is keeping track. Will appreciates it, you say. The parson nods. Goes back inside, presumably to read in the cold, because the parsonage is only marginally warmer than the nave, and at least the nave has more floor space. Will is already gone. You look for him and don't see him. He walked home ahead of everyone the way he does, the way he has always done. You and Marjorie walk back through the village, your footsteps in the snow, the smoke rising from every chimney. The morning of the worst day of the second week, you wake to something new. Ice on the inside of the wall. Not a lot. A thin glaze, barely visible, on the section of wall between the bed platform and the window hole. You'd almost miss it in the dim pre-dawn light, but the light catches it at a certain angle, and the wall glitters. You put your finger to it. Ice. Actual ice. On the inside surface of a wall that is, by any measure, supposed to be the boundary between inside and outside, which means the cold has been thorough enough, and the wall thin enough at this point, and the distance from the fire far enough, that the surface temperature of the interior wall has dropped below freezing. You don't panic, but you note it. You tell Will, who comes by that afternoon. He looks at it, touches it, nods. Add a peg, he says. You look at him. A wooden peg in the wall, right there about waist height. Hang a piece of sacking over it. Traps a layer of air between the sacking and the wall. Air is a better insulator than mud. You look at the wall. That's it. That's it. He turns away. Simple things. Most things that kill people in winter aren't complicated. They're simple things people didn't do. He looks at you, and for a moment his face has something in it that is different from his usual weather report expression. Something that is trying, in Will's limited vocabulary for this kind of thing, to convey importance. "You're doing all right," he says. It is not warm praise. It is not even, by most standards, praise at all. But from Will, in January, after a death night and a cold wall and 4 pieces of wood at 3 a.m, it lands exactly where it needs to land. "Thank you," you say. He nods once, goes to the door. "Spring," he says, at the door. "Spring," you say. He goes out. You hammer a peg into the wall, hang a piece of sacking. It looks slightly absurd. It works. On the 15th of January, Bessie stops eating. Not dramatically, not all at once. You notice because you've developed the habit of watching her eat, checking the quantity, checking the quality of her attention to the hay, using her appetite as an indicator of her health, the way you check a person's pulse. She is your main heat source, your eventual source of milk when the cold breaks and her production returns, and she is Marjorie's particular responsibility and affection. She matters. On the 15th, she eats about half what she usually eats. You note it. Don't say anything to Marjorie yet. On the 16th, about a third. On the 17th, you tell Marjorie. Marjorie goes into the byre, spends time with Bessie the way she always does, hands on the animal's side, speaking to her in a low voice that you've never been close enough to hear the words of, just the tone, which is the tone you use with someone who is struggling with something and needs to know you're there. She comes back out. She's not hot, Marjorie says. No fever. That's good. Her nose is dry. Dry nose on a cow means something. You know this, but you don't know what it means with precision, and your face says so. It can mean she's cold, Marjorie says, or stressed, or coming down with something. She pauses. Or nothing. They sometimes just go off their feed for a day or two. And if it's not nothing, Marjorie is quiet. If she gets worse, Will know what to do. You both know what Will will say if it's serious. Will say, "This is the judgment call of whether you can keep her alive, and if you can't keep her alive, the judgment call of what to do next." And what to do next with a cow in January in a village in 1623 is a calculation about meat and hide and fat that you don't want to make but that other people have made before you, without having the luxury of not making it. That evening Marjorie brings Bessie extra hay, sits with her in the byre for an hour. You can hear her occasionally speaking in that low voice. You don't go in. This is Marjorie's thing to do, and you let her do it. On the 18th, Bessie eats all her hay, and then some of Marjorie's offering from the second armful. On the 19th, she's back to normal. You say nothing about it. Marjorie says nothing about it. But the relief is there, quiet and total. The same relief as the fire catching on a bad morning. The specific relief of a thing that was threatened and isn't now. A resource that the winter almost took. "Good girl," Marjorie says in the byre that evening. You can hear Bessie's response from the other side of the partition. A low exhale, warm and slow, the sound of a large animal that is comfortable. You bank the fire, go to bed. By the 3rd week of January, your body has been dealing with cold for so long that certain things become background. Your fingers ache. Not all the time. When you're close to the fire or when they've been wrapped and still for a while, the aching stops. But when you're outside or working or touching cold surfaces, the ache is a constant. Deep in the first joints of the fingers, at the base of the thumb. You've stopped registering it as something requiring attention. It's just there, part of the weather of the body. Your feet in the mornings. The shoes have been wet and dried so many times now that the leather has stiffened, has curled slightly at the toes, has developed small creases that don't flex the way new leather flexes. Every morning, putting them on, the cold leather, the stiffness of it, the way it takes 10 minutes of walking before the leather warms and softens and moves with your foot rather than against it. Those 10 minutes every morning are a negotiation. You're back, standing for long periods near the fire, hunched against the cold at the periphery. You've been standing and crouching and carrying in ways that summer work doesn't require, and your lower back has thoughts about this. At night, lying down, there's a relief in extending that is physical and immediate, like releasing something you've been holding, and underneath all of it, hunger, not starvation, not the kind of hunger that is a crisis, but a persistent low-grade want that is always present, that the pottage addresses twice a day, and that comes back within a few hours, that makes you acutely aware of every calorie in the hut, in a way that summer's abundance made completely unnecessary. You're eating less than your body wants. You know this because of the particular quality of attention you pay to food, the way a bowl of pottage now has your complete attention while you eat it, the way you clean the bowl with your finger, the way you notice and register every piece of dried meat and every handful of oats going into the pot. In summer, you ate without thinking much about eating. In January, eating is a considered activity. You don't talk about any of this. Marjorie doesn't talk about any of this. You eat what you have, and you don't perform hunger at each other because performing hunger doesn't feed you and is simply an additional unpleasantness on top of the existing unpleasantness. This too is a form of consideration. On the 22nd of January, the sky clears, genuinely clears. Not the pale, flat, grey clearing of a mild day, but a full winter clearing where the clouds go away, and the sky above is deep black, and the stars come out in a quantity you don't see in summer, because summer has ambient light and short nights and clouds. But in January, on a clear night, the stars over a village with no gas lamps and no electric light, and 30 fire holes in 30 thatch roofs are so numerous and so bright that standing outside and looking up makes you feel a particular kind of small. Not the bad kind of small, the accurate kind. You go out at some point in the middle of the night. The fire needed checking. It always needs checking. And you step outside for a moment and stop. The Milky Way. You don't know what it's called. Nobody has told you it has a name, but you've seen it before, on clear nights, and it does what it always does. It crosses the sky in a dense band from one horizon to the other, a smear of cold light that has no individual stars you can make out, just a presence, a cloud of brightness in a black sky. The cold, the silence, your breath making its cloud. The village around you, all its fires banked low or burning under banked turf, 30 roofs under 30 feet of night sky, all of it small and specific and particular under that immense indifferent scatter of light. You stand there until your feet are going numb in the thin shoes. Then you go back inside. You don't wake Marjorie to see it. She'll see it on another night. Or she won't. The stars will be there. You stoke the fire and go back to bed and lie there for a while with the image still behind your eyes. The band of the Milky Way crossing a January sky over a sleeping village in 1623, and all the people under it who don't know and will never know that someone named Thomas Hartley stood in the cold and looked up and felt the size of it, felt small, felt accurate, went back inside, went back to the fire. And this is how the weeks pass, not in dramatic arcs, not in a narrative that builds to a single clear moment of crisis and resolution, in pieces, in days, in the accumulation of small things done right and small things survived and small things understood. You learn that Bessie's warmth through the partition is different on cold nights versus mild nights. On cold nights she presses closer to the wattle, and the heat is more focused. You start sleeping with the mattress shifted a foot to the left, closer to the partition, on the coldest nights. The difference is not large. The difference is enough. You learn that the fire burns differently depending on which way the wind is. A south wind lets the smoke draw up cleanly. A north wind pushes it back. A still night gives you the cleanest burn. You start reading the pre-dawn quality of the cold to anticipate what the fire will need that day, not consciously, just in the way hands learn things before the mind articulates them. You learn that Marjorie wakes once in the night, every night, just for a moment. You can feel the change in her breathing. She checks the fire by sound and smell and temperature without opening her eyes. Then she goes back to sleep. She's been doing this the whole time, which you only noticed 3 weeks in, and by the time you noticed, it had already become part of the night's rhythm, as natural and unremarkable as Bessie's slow breath. You learn that hunger is most manageable when you stay busy. That stillness invites awareness of the body. So you stay busy. Small repairs, small tasks, things that need doing and things that don't need doing but provide occupation. You carve a new handle for the water bucket. You repair a section of the wattle partition where one rod has come loose. You organise the shelf 3 times. You learn that Will is lonelier than he lets on. Not because he says anything about it, but because he comes over more days than he needs to in terms of practical necessity, and he stays slightly longer each time. You don't comment on this. You just let the visits be what they are. Sometimes you offer him the stool near the fire. He takes it, that's enough. On the 27th, you do an accounting. Not a deliberate accounting. You don't sit down with a ledger, but the kind of accounting your body does naturally when the immediate danger has passed and there's time to assess. Food. Lower than it should be. Not dangerous yet. You have enough to get to February, enough to get to March if you're careful. But the margin is smaller than you'd like. The pottage is thinner than it was in December. The dried meat is almost gone. What remains is grain, beans, and the last of the salted Monday. Wood. Better. The 2 trips to the copse this week have put you ahead of where you were a week ago. The ash logs will left you in the first week, and that you've slowly been returning, piece by piece, quietly, set by his door in the mornings, have been replaced. The debt is paid. Or near enough, Bessie. Well, her hay is lower than you'd like, but manageable. She's producing no milk yet. Cows don't produce in deep winter, or not enough to matter. The cold and the short days suppress it. But she will when the light changes. When the days start to extend past 8 hours, something in her body will begin. Will told you to watch for it. The first trickle of milk in February is the first sign. Not of spring exactly, but of the direction things are moving. Your hands. Surviving. The cracks are the same. The ache is the same. But they work. They do what they need to do. Marjorie. Well, better perhaps than you are in certain ways. She has the quality that certain people have of rising to difficulty rather than being depleted by it. January has given her competence. She moves through the hut with the ease of someone who knows exactly where everything is and what everything does and what it needs. She is, in the most practical sense, more at home here than you are. You are, in the most practical sense, learning to become her. On the 29th, Will comes with the small cloth bundle again. You've seen it before. He's the kind of man who wraps things carefully, even small things, even when the wrapping is just a scrap of cloth folded twice. He sets it on the shelf without comment. Later, when he's gone, you open it. A handful of oats and a small square of dried fruit. Apple or pear, you can't tell. That Agnes must have stored in September. Saved for a particular use. Saved for something. Given to you. You and Marjorie eat the dried fruit that night slowly. A small piece each. The sweetness of it so unexpected and so intense after weeks of pottage that it stops the conversation entirely. You just sit there, each with your piece of fruit, tasting it, and the firelight moves around you, and outside the cold does what it does, and for that minute the fruit is the whole world. We should give Will something, Marjorie says. He won't take anything. I know. She turns the last small bit of dried fruit between her fingers. But we should find something anyway, for when he will. She puts the last piece in her mouth, closes her eyes for a moment. Spring, she says. The word has two meanings now, a season, and a thing you have both been holding in your mouths like fruit. Spring, you say. The morning of what you believe is the last day of the month is unremarkable in every way that matters. You wake at the usual time. The fire is where you left it. Lower than you'd like, but alive. Catching quickly when you add the first piece of wood. The room is cold, as it always is, but not viciously cold. Not the cold of crisis. Just the cold of January doing what January does. Bessie is well. You hear her movers before you check on her. Her sounds are the sounds of a cow that is fine, unhurried, heavy, reassured by the approach of routine. You go outside. Break the ice in the barrel, thin this morning, thinner than yesterday. Not because it's warmer, but because the angle of the cold has shifted slightly, infinitesimally. Some change in the wind's direction, a degree or two. Nothing you could point to if someone asked, but your hands know it. You stand in the lane for a moment. The sky, still grey, still January, still offering no promises. But the grey is different. Lighter, perhaps. Not by much, barely perceptible, than it was 2 weeks ago. The days have been lengthening since the solstice, technically, since the 21st of December. They've been lengthening for 5 weeks now. You can't see it day to day. It's invisible, the lengthening, like the growth of a child that you can't see if you watch, but that you notice suddenly and all at once after weeks of not noticing. But something in the morning air holds a note that wasn't there before. Not warmth, not spring, just the absence of a particular quality of darkness. You stand there for longer than you meant to. Your feet are getting cold. The water bucket is full. Old Thomas the shepherd comes out of his door down the lane, spots you, raises a hand. You raise a hand. He goes back inside. This is the full extent of the social interaction the cold allows at this hour, and it is, somehow, sufficient. You go back inside. That evening, the last evening of January, you and Marjorie are quiet in the firelight for a long time. Not the quiet of people who have nothing to say. The quiet of people who have too many things to say and have learned that not all of them need saying. At some point, Marjorie puts down her needlework and looks at the fire. Do you remember coming here in May? She asks. You think about this. May. The hut with the door open, and the light coming in, and the field outside green, and the whole problem of winter theoretical, a thing that would happen eventually like death, which you knew about but didn't think about daily. I thought it was small, you say. It is small. I thought. You stop. Think about what you thought. I thought it would be harder to manage than it was. In summer. She looks at you. And now? You sit with this for a moment. The fire, the warmth of the room, the sound of Bessie's slow breath. I thought winter would be hard, you say. I knew it would be hard. People told me. They told me too. But they didn't tell me. You stop again, trying to find the right word for what they didn't tell you. They didn't tell me it would be like this, specifically like this, that you'd spend 3 weeks knowing exactly how many pieces of wood you had, that you'd know Bessie's breathing by sound in the dark, that the cold would have a quality, different qualities. Marjorie nods slowly. That it would be a relationship, she says. Not just a thing that happens to you. That's it. That's the word. Yes, you say. The fire. My mother said something when we got married, Marjorie says. She said the first winter is the hardest. She said after the first winter you know you can do it, and after you know you can do it, it's different. What did she mean, different? Marjorie thinks for a moment. I think she meant less frightening. Not easier. The same work, but less frightening because you know you can do it. She picks up her needlework again. You've done it before, so you know you can do it again. And that changes the quality of the whole thing. The quality. You think about old Will. 53 years old and the most patient man you've ever encountered. Patient in the way of someone for whom patience is not a virtue, so much as a basic orientation toward reality. The cold will come, and he will deal with it, and it will go, and he will still be here. That's all. That's everything. He has done this before. He knows he can do it again. Next winter, you say. She looks up. Next winter I'll know where to get the wood. I'll know about the crack in the north wall before it opens. I'll know which nights the fire needs watching and which ones it doesn't. Marjorie smiles. Next winter you'll know to make friends with a pig before you know its name, she says. You both look at Monday's pit. Empty now. The wooden gate propped open. Next pig, you say. Next pig, she confirms. She goes back to her needlework. You go back to watching the fire, the hut around you, small, warm, lit from within, holding together against the cold outside the way it has been doing since 1580. The cold outside doing what cold does, the fire inside doing what fire does, you doing what you do. It's enough. Let the evening go quiet. Let the fire settle. You've been at this for a month now. A full month. 31 days of breaking ice and banking fire and going to the copse and watching the wood pile and sleeping in pieces and waking to cold floors and doing it all again the next day. 31 days of learning things in your hands and your feet and your back that nobody could have taught you in words. The boy who moved into this hut in May thought winter was a season. You understand now that it's a skill. Like any skill, it requires time and failure and specific embodied knowledge, the kind that lives in the joints of your fingers and in the particular way your body reads the air temperature through the soles of your shoes. You can't read it in a book. You can't be told it. You have to spend a month in it and come out the other side knowing things. You've spent a month in it. You're coming out the other side. The fire is at its evening height, not high, not low, steady. The orange light it throws moves slightly with the variations in the flame, making the shadows on the mud wall breathe. The wall breathes, the light breathes, your eyes are heavy. The day has been Morning fire, Bessie, water barrel, the copse, the cold, the afternoon tasks, the pottage, the evening quiet. A full day. A day that used everything you had and left you with exactly the right amount of tiredness, the kind that doesn't fight sleep, the kind that walks you to the edge of it and hands you over. Marjorie has already set down her work. Her breathing has slowed. Almost there. Almost. You lay one last piece of wood on the fire, not because it needs it urgently, it will last until morning, but because the gesture is satisfying, tending, the act of looking at a fire and deciding it needs something and giving it that thing, the intimacy of it, the responsibility. You pull back from the fire, cross to the bed. The straw crackles. You pull the doubled blanket up. The warmth comes immediately. Your own warmth reflected back. Marjorie's warmth against your side. The warmth of Bessie, faint and steady through the partition. The warmth of a large animal sleeping and breathing and being well. Let your breathing slow. The fire is there. The fire will be there in the morning. Your hands can rest. They've broken ice and split wood and packed cold clay into cold cracks and carried more weight than they thought they could carry. They've earned this. Every cracked knuckle, every deep ache in the joints. Earned. Set them down. Let them be still. Your feet can rest. They've broken through snow and walked on frozen ground and stood on cold floors at 3 a.m. and climbed a hill in January mud. Let them be still now. Let the cold in them drain slowly into the warmth of the blanket. Your back can rest. Set down the carrying. Set down the weight of the days. Let the mattress take it. The sounds of the hut go softer. The fire. A slow settling now, an occasional deep tick from the wood as it burns through. Not alarming, not threatening. Just the sound of something giving heat and asking nothing in return. Bessie, her breath. The slow, steady rhythm of a large animal that is warm and fed and sleeping. Outside, nothing. Still. The cold is there, but it is quiet tonight. It has made its arguments. It has done what cold does. You're still here. Let January go. It's almost over. It's done most of its work. It's broken you and remade you and taught you the specific things that only it can teach. The things that don't exist in books because they live in bodies, in hands, in the backs of the knees and the joints of the fingers and the part of the mind that wakes up when the fire goes low. Those things are yours now. You'll carry them into February and into March and into all the winters that come after this one. They will not get easier, but they will get different. Less frightening, Marjorie's mother said. You believe her. Think about this room. This fire will go out eventually. Not tonight. Tonight it will burn until morning, but eventually. When this hut is finally gone, when the ridgepole fails and the walls return to mud and the thatch goes back to earth, the fire will go out, and some other fire will be burning somewhere else. It has always been this way. In 1623 and before 1623 and in all the centuries before that, people keeping fires, people learning in their bodies how to do it, what the wood needs, what the cold wants, how to negotiate the winter toward something livable, toward warmth enough, toward enough. The knowledge passes, not always in words, sometimes just in bodies, in the doing of it, in the teaching of someone young by someone old in a cold room with a bucket of clay paste and a cracked wall, and just enough time before dark. Will taught you. Agnes taught Will. Someone taught Agnes. And someday, maybe, you'll stand in a cold byre in early winter and point at a crack in a young man's wall and say, "Use your hands." Push it in. Simple things. Most things that kill people aren't complicated. The fire, low now, getting lower. It doesn't matter. Let it go low. It has done its work today. Outside, the cold, the silent cold of a still January night, the kind that holds the village in its hand like something it's deciding what to do with, and then decides, again, to let alone. And inside, warmth. Not much warmth, but enough warmth. The warmth of two people and a cow and a fire that's been burning all day and the walls that are still holding. Enough. Let your thoughts slow. They were fast today, the thoughts. All day, calculations and decisions and the small, constant attention that winter requires. Let them slow now. Let them follow the fire down into its evening mode, lower and more patient, still present but not urgent. The fire, your hands, the warm place in the bed, the sound of the hut breathing. Let sleep come. It comes the way it always comes when you've worked hard and stayed cold and come home to warmth. Not all at once, not as a thing you choose, but as a thing that was always going to happen and has simply arrived at its time. The last thing you hear is the fire, a single small pop, a settling. Then Bessie, very faintly, her slow breath, then nothing, or everything at once. The way sleep sounds when it finally comes, like the rest of the world becoming very far away, and the warmth underneath you becoming very close, and the dark behind your eyes becoming the only dark there is. Centuries from now, this hut will be gone. The mud will have returned to the earth. The thatch will be long since rotted. The hearthstones will have been moved or buried or found again by someone digging. The field over which you dragged branches in the snow will have been ploughed and built upon and changed beyond recognition. The village will have grown and changed and grown again, and some of the people in it will live in houses with central heating and double glazing and insulation in the walls, and they will complain about being cold in the way that people complain about things when they have never been genuinely cold. And some of them, on some winter nights, will feel the particular desire to lie in a warm place and listen to something, to be carried backward, to spend a little while in a harder world and feel the contrast and come back to warmth, knowing they've been somewhere real. They'll find their way here, maybe. They'll find their way to this cold room and this fire and this specific January, and they'll spend a little while with Thomas Hartley and Marjorie and old Will and Bessie in the mud hut that held against the worst winter had to offer, and then they'll come back to their warm beds and their duvets and their thermostat-controlled rooms, and they'll feel the warmth differently, more specifically, more gratefully. The way you feel it now, not as the absence of cold, but as its own thing, its own presence, its own gift. Some things don't change. The cold comes every year. It will always come. And people will always need warmth, always need the fire, always lie down at the end of the day and feel, in some part of themselves that is older than language, the specific relief of, I am warm, I have made it. The night can do what it does. I am inside. Let January go. Let the fire burn low. Let the cold be outside. Let February come in its own time, at its own pace, carrying the first pale signs of what follows it. For now, rest. For now, the warmth you've earned. For now, the quiet room and the steady breath and the dark behind your eyes going deeper and softer, and finally still, you've made it. Good night.